half a day. Sorry for the technical difficulties. The Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning is calling this public hearing to order. It is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. The time is now 2:22 p.m. In compliance with open government law, notices of today's hearing were published in the Guam Daily Post, provided email to senators, stakeholders, local media, and posted in the Government of Guam Public Notices website. On Tuesday, April 2nd for the 5-day notice, and Sunday, April 7th for the 48-hour notice. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that are here today, Senator Kanata and Senator Taitgui Situasmasi. The purpose of this public hearing is to discuss the following agenda item is to receive testimony on Resolution 325-37 LS, sponsored by Senator Sabina Perez, relative to preserving one of the most valuable cultural sites in the Marianas Archipelago by identifying an alternative location for the Ritidian Wildlife Refuge Visitor Center and its associated facilities pursuant to the planned relocation prescribed in the May 2020 Memorandum of Agreement between the Department of Interior and Department of Navy in order to prevent further unnecessary environmental cultural destruction. The rules of conduct are as follows. Those called to testify will be in order of the government agencies, followed by those who reserved in advance by my office before April 5th, followed by those who signed up on the sign-in sheet. Please ensure that your written comments are provided to my staff so we can disseminate them, as well as include them in the committee report. Prior to speaking, please state your name, position if relevant for record-keeping purposes. Senators will be given an opportunity to ask questions of the panel. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance and nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. Now to begin our agenda. Resolution 325-37 LS, sponsored by Senator Sabina Perez, relative to preserving one of the most valuable cultural sites in the Marianas Archipelago by identifying an alternative location for the Ritidian Wildlife Refuge Center and its associated facilities pursuant to the planned relocation prescribed in the May 2020 Memorandum of Agreement between the Department of Interior and the Department of Navy in order to prevent further unnecessary environmental and cultural destruction. So I'd like to make some opening comments before we invite the public for their testimony. Resolution 325 calls for the preservation of culturally and environmentally significant sites of Latexan relative to the planned relocation of the visitor center, as said earlier. The proposed relocation would further disturb the habitat and cultural sites of Latexan, a sacred site undergoing severe devastation due to the operation of the live fire training range complex and other military acts. Thus, Resolution 325 calls for the Department of Navy and Department of Interior to identify an alternative location that is federally controlled, disturbed, and outside the surface danger zones of the live fire training range complex. Ultimately, Resolution 325-37 aims to expediently mitigate the adverse effects of the center's federal relocation on Chamorro ancestral lands. Given the series of federal actions that resulted in the construction of the live fire training range and the May 2020 Memorandum of Agreement, Resolution 325 offers an urgent stopgap measure to protect a portion of Latexan in the immediate capacity of this legislature. Latexan is one of the most important archaeological sites in the Marianas Archipelago. The proposed relocation of the Refuge Center furthers this unnecessary environmental and cultural devastation for lands that can remain intact. Relocation to disturb federally occupied lands that do not further infringe upon the rights of ancestral landowners is essential in minimizing the destructive consequences of this center's relocation. With Resolution 325's purpose in mind, this body ultimately defers to the recommendations, will, and ownership of the ancestral landowners of Latexan. Furthermore, this body recognizes the authority and intent of Article 10, Chapter 68, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the Ritidian Point Land, and other laws recognizing U.S. federal government seizure of lands belonging to the Chamorro people. Resolution 325 acknowledges the ancestral landowners' dispossession of Latexan. This resolution's reference to the Ritidian Wildlife Center does not serve as an agreement to the federal government's occupation or designation of Latexan as a wildlife refuge. The federal possession of Latexan and other sites in the name of national security or environmental conservation has disenfranchised Chamorro ancestral landowners, and interrelatedly, it fails to uphold the mission of the environmental protection expressed by Department of Defense and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. True remediation and justice for Latexan and the Chamorro people lies in the restoration of ancestral landowners' rights to their lands, territories, and resources. Research and analyses by experts and organizations such as the United Nations stress the inseparability of indigenous rights and environmentalism. As a part of its call to action, Resolution 325 acknowledges this relationship in referencing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the statement provided by the January 2021 mandates of UN Special Rapporteurs to the United States. In addition to these materials, various reports, mechanisms, and experts recognize Indigenous peoples to hold deep values, traditional knowledge, and ties to their lands and waters that culminates in environmental stewardship. Without the full recognition of Chamorro ancestral landowners to their indigenous rights, territories, and resources, environmental preservation and the holistic welfare of our Mariana Islands cannot be achieved. Thus, our people's advocacy for the protection of our environment, cultural heritage, and rights is imperative to resolving the devastating consequences of colonization and militarization. The full recognition of our self-determination is key to safeguarding our lands, territories, and resources. As our people continue our long-standing quest for self-determination, this resolution aims to provide a short-term solution, protecting a concerned portion of Latexan until our rights are fully recognized. So for the record, we sent invitation letters to the Director, Department of Agriculture, the State Historic Preservation Officer, Mr. Patrick Lujan, Executive Director of Ancestral Lands, Mr. John Birch, and Director of Department of Land Management, Director Joseph Borja. So we will follow up with them in regards to testimony regarding information, as well as any kind of perspective that they can provide. As of 1:30 p.m. today, we received written testimonies in support of this resolution. Maria Hernandez-May, Josh Laurenti, Cassie Berdalio, Lily Berdalio, Jonathan Sablon, Eliza Maglotnia, Hannah Soto, Kara Schwartz, Tony Brooks, Dylan Sablon, Nicole Delisle Duenas, Barbara Beneventi, Lisa Tenorio, Atisa Marie Junio, Amber Beneventi, Vanessa Story, Erin Story, Hannah Villagomez Sablon, Isa Rahana Flores, Anastasia Schwen, Justin Beneventi, Anthony Duenas, Mariana Julian, Josephine Ong, Rita Edwards, Robert Babek, April Schwartz, Paige Regis, Tewid Mirespang, Moneka de Oro, Natalie Bajado, Jihi Choi, Masakata Collective, Elsa Stamatopolo, Valerie Gamboa, Kylie Akiona, Austin Ringelstein, Alexander White, Lauren Tahiron, Amanda Dedicatoria, and Teresa Laguagna, so as of 1:30. So we're still receiving testimonies in support. So at this time, I'd like to call those that have come here to testify on Resolution 325, and when I call your name, feel free to come up, or you may choose not to as well. Cassie Berdalio, Vanessa Duenas, Jerry Santos, Anna Uggan, Antonio Sablon. Yeah, feel free to come to the table. So we're gonna, if you want to provide testimony. Maria Hernandez, Dominic Flores, Josh Laurenti, I'm not sure if I see this, Rachel Davis, I'm not sure if I'm reading that correctly, Eliza Silverio, James Wolford, Maneka Flores, Angela Santos, Tewid Merespeng, and then we have David Cabrera, Melanie Guerrero, Kenneth Guerrero, and Lourdes Bajado. So if you feel like you want to come up, feel free to come to the front. And we'll call you in order, if that's okay, of those who signed up. Okay, so we have Vanessa Duenas. You're recognized, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hafaday, my name is Vanessa Duenas. I am a master's student at UOG and an apprentice to the Master Surohana Rosalia Ferreran Mateo, lovingly known as Mama Chai. We practice traditional Chamorro healing arts at Guma Duamti, and I'm here to provide testimony in support of Resolution 325-37. Guma Duamti sees countless patients every day. Mama Chai, who is now 88 years old, is happy to serve the community of Guam. My mentor is always sacrificing herself for the sake of others. Nothing would make her happier than to be able to keep practicing healing for the people. We see an array of age groups and sicknesses varying from children's congestion, psoriasis, women's health remedies, for example, if a woman is having trouble conceiving, diabetes, lung problems, even Tautomona sickness, and I can vouch that there are people in this room who have been treated by Mama Chai and I. Many of these patients are so grateful to Mama Chai for easing their pain and curing them. Letexin, also known as Ritidian, hereafter Letexin, has always been a place of great importance to us in continuing our traditional healing practices. It is a place where, as an apprentice, I have learned a great deal, as it is one of my classrooms. Letexin is home to countless endemic and non-endemic flora and fauna. Letexin is unlike any other place on Guam to forage medicine. Nowhere else on Guam can you find almost all of the medicinal plants in one area. The argument of propagating these plants to another area to solve the issue is a major problem which goes against our traditional Chamorro healing ways of foraging for medicine. For generations upon generations, native medicine has been passed down, ensuring the health of the population of the Mariana Islands. This knowledge is real, and I have experienced it for myself, and I see it work on the people we treat every day. We cannot just move the plants and call it good. The almond plants are strongest when they thrive in their natural environment. This knowledge has stood the test of time. Not only that, but Letexin is home to an extremely rare and powerful medicine, vital in treating non-communicable diseases that you cannot find anywhere else on this island, that's accessible to the general public. According to the World Health Organization on the Health of Indigenous Peoples, and recalling the United Nations General Assembly resolutions on the rights of Indigenous peoples, of which reaffirms that Indigenous peoples have the right to their traditional medicines and to maintain their health practices, including the conservation of their vital medicinal plants. It then urges member states to contribute to capacity building for Indigenous peoples so that they may recall their right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their cultural heritage and cultural knowledge. I humbly come before the legislature to beg, Ekongak por favor, please listen. The health of the environment, the health of the people, and the wealth of our cultural knowledge are what's at stake. Apas y isao tasiha, payment for our sins. If we do not act about the desecration of lands up at Letexin, we will all pay dearly with our health and with a great loss to our traditional healing practices. By sacrificing our futures, in sacrificing a vast area of medicine unfounded anywhere else on Guam. Just in the way that we see the people of Guam plagued with cancerous diseases from countless contaminations in our soils, rivers, and oceans, more of this contamination will happen if we allow this to happen. Hafa mas malagotnyeha. How much more would they like to take everything the sun touches? Until Guam is unlivable for the civilian population, what will be left for us then? Mumuzi ideretsota. Fight for our rights, por favor. We must stand up. If we do not stand up and defend the Texan, we will all pay dearly. If we do not see it in this lifetime, which I'm sure we will, our children and our children's children will see it. And what will we have left for them then? We swore on holy words and on our flag of Guam, from the highest of our thoughts and the deepest of our hearts, to the most of our capabilities, to offer ourselves, to protect and defend our God-given rights. I hinengi, I kultura, I lenguaje, I airi, I hanam, janitano tsamoru. Protegi I amota, protegi I hinemlota. Sainamaasi.
Sainamaasi, Vanessa, for those words. Yeah, and I just want to thank you all for being here. And we've been here many, many times before, speaking out. And I know it's truly hard to be here, but it's so necessary. Masi. I'd like to recognize Tony Sablan, who's, I think, Masi.
Buenas and Masi, Senator. Senator Tello, Senator Sabina. I came here to testify in reference of questioning the Fish and Wildlife. What is their purpose up at Ritidian? They put a cyclone fence on the stretch of the property, and then they said they're going to keep the snakes out. They put a fine mesh wire over the cyclone fence. Within a few years, that a mesh wire, all rusty, and they were dropping all over the place. And then the pigs have an idea that they could break that cyclone fence to go in and out. Now, if they're saying that they put those fences there to keep the snakes out so they could reintroduce the birds that are in captivity now, then obviously they have the very wrong idea. The original landowners are the people that were deprived from their land, and during the transition for U.S. Fish and Wildlife, again, this is a force taking away from the people. Instead of giving them back, the military astutely gave it to Fish and Wildlife, so they know that at any time they want it, they could take it right back. I like to say the U.S. military has a huge stranglehold in our economy, the economy of Guam. You know, the more dependent we are on them, the more control they have on us. Such as, here's an example. Look at Tumon Bay. From Hilton all the way to, I guess, Niku is the furthest north. It's a stretch of about 3 miles of beachfront property. If you take the northern section, starting with Haputu, Urunao, Inapsen, and Litegzan and Inapsen, it's a stretch of 8 miles. And there's been in the past talks about developing Urunao, for example, to a tune of $4 billion a year of master plan, hotel, championship golf course. and stuff like that. But those ideas and those things were all killed because the military continues to say, hey, you don't have an access road. I've been researching lately, and all the condemnations of both the Northwest field that was condemned for $8 an acre and the Ritidian property, there's nothing mentioned about taking the land. As a matter of fact, there's mention about providing access roads to those original landowners. So, we just have to stand up and say no more to the federal government. I remember I was a board member of the Ancestral Land Commission. I was a commissioner there. And there's a group of nonprofit organizations that is asking the governor under the governor's conference room to please ask the admiral to put a pause. Just slow down on their land, on their progress of just bulldozing everything down. And the governor's response was, we can't because the Navy is above us. She was absolutely correct if we allow them. But, I went up there and I questioned, Governor, you're representing us. Let me ask a question. Whose island is this? Is it the Navy or is it ours? And whose property are we talking about? Is it the Navy again or is it ours? Why are we subservient to the military? They should be paying us rent, and if we really take the fair market value of Guam, $10 billion a year is not a high price because we are the tip of the spear. We're target 3 big nations such as North Korea, China, and Russia that we could easily be powderized when they decide to attack us. And to the U.S. military in Washington, D.C., Guam is nothing more. There is no respect for the civilian populace, but we are just a military base. We're dispensable. Now, they talk about hypersonic missiles, or they talk in the past about B-52s. What's the purpose of those? When there's a detection of a rocket coming our way, they all take off. And the only thing is that they didn't prevent those rockets from landing on us. But they're gone to do their work and attack back. But we are going to be powderized. Our children, our families, and our island entirely, we're all going to be destroyed. Again, I emphasize that the economy of Guam really release this land back and let the original owner determine what they want to do with it. Let's just stop the military from dictating to us as to what we're going to do with our homeland. If you look around our neighborhoods, CNMI, they built a runway there. It's a 40-year lease. The U.S. military paid $30 million in rent. What are we getting in Guam? Are we getting a penny for rental? Or is it, this thing, you're American citizens, we'll give you food stamp, we'll give you that. And no, we'll bring everybody into your island, so we'll minoritize you. So in the future, if there's any vote, everybody has the right to vote. And therefore, you're going to be outvoted because everybody wants to be American. The Chamorros don't have a say-so on our own property, on our own homeland. We are nothing more than a colony with a thin veneer of a cosmetic appearance. That is what we are, and I support this bill to get this land back to the original owners, because let them decide what to do with the land. They are a better keepers of the land than the U.S. military. The military does, when they need it, they bulldoze. They don't consider what our traditional, our cultural, and our emotional feeling on that. They're going to consider 8-mile stretch of beach. What would that do to the economy of the tourism of Guam? My gosh. Let's return this land back to the original owner and start pounding on developing Guam for the better future, and stop being dependent on the U.S. government. Sijus Masi.
Dankalu Sijus Masi, Sinat Saban, for your testimony. Yeah, thank you, and for all those years, decades, you've been raising awareness and mentoring a whole generation, several generations of us, and for your leadership, Sijus Masi, for your leadership. At this time, I'd like to recognize Maria Hernandez May for her testimony. Sijus Masi.
Buenas and Hafade. Guahusi Maria Hernandez May, Tau Tau Guahan, Marianas, San Tau Tau Latexan. Sijus Masi, Senator Sabina, for writing this resolution, and to all of our senators here today. I am the great-great-granddaughter of Ritidian original landowners. My Saina, Ana Matanani Pangilinan, Benigno Leonguerrero Flores, and Dolores Martinez Flores are here today with us in this room. The Wildlife Refuge office that is proposed to be moved for this firing range sits where my Nanambiha's home once stood. Ritidian is home to our families. Our childhood at Latexan looked like waking up, stepping out of tents into the cool breeze, onto the cold, wet sand, to the smell of banila saga and fried rice. It looked like praying to Gwalazen Gwalu before entering the dark jungle, to a makeshift shower where my tata's home once stood. It looked like walking into the jungle and dancing with hundreds of butterflies. S'mores over the campfire with my primas and primos, playing battleship, climbing trees, parking at locked gates in the dark of the night, and hopping over as a family, passing our supplies from one family member to another, finding snakes in the van, sit-in protests in the form of campouts on our land every weekend, led by my strong and fearless Saina. As kids, we never felt fear at Latexan. When refuge staff would harass our families, take down license plate numbers, or when police would arrest and put our family members into their cop cars, we didn't worry because we felt no fear in our elders. We knew, and they taught us, that this is our land. Our Manyaina are still guiding us today, and they call on us to attend these hearings as a testament to them and their resistance, a heartfelt and tragic story of being forced out of their homes, a struggle that they fought against until the day they died, and they asked our elders to never stop fighting, and so here we are. As I uncover more about the land taking by gathering documents from local agencies, including the Ancestral Lands Commission, I'm learning more and more about how records show that my Saina did not pick up their check payments for the land. This is their sign of resistance that they wanted us to find. I almost cried seeing that. This is stolen land. The legislative record shows us that this is stolen land. In 1995, 21 lawmakers unanimously agreed that Ritidian was taken by force, deceit, and outright theft. This stolen land is proposed for use as a buffer zone for a 700-acre firing range complex. 900 football fields of Tomorrowland has been destroyed for this military buildup. We do not consent. Our ancestors would not consent to further harm being done to the land and more construction for yet another facility on sacred land. The decision to move the Refuge Center for a bombing range is an insult to the original landowner families who were never afforded an option for facilities to be moved so that they could return home. Moving the refuge facilities was never an option for our families in the 90s. But if the military wants a bombing range, heaven and earth are moved to make these plans happen. This should send shivers down the spines of every Chamorro in our homeland. That we as human beings in our islands continue to be disregarded and seen as an afterthought to profiteers and weapons of war. You as lawmakers have an opportunity to turn the tables, support this resolution to proclaim that our sacred lands and waters and our people are a priority. DOD, it's time that you return the land to make it right. Situs Masi.
Situs Masi, Maria. Yes, I think we really need to make this right. This is the time that we need to make this right. I think every Indigenous person here has their identity tied to their lands, and once that's taken away, it really undermines our connection to our land as a people. So thank you for that. I'd like to recognize Senator Barnett for being here. Thank you. Okay, so we have Josh Laurenti. You're recognized.
Buenas den Hafide, Guahusi Joshua Allen Guerrero Laurenti. In February, I returned home to Guahan after 10 years living in Portland, earning degrees in political science and public policy, and working as a community organizer on an array of federal issues, advancing equity initiatives, reforming democracy, and fighting for environmental justice. As young as I am, my experience has taught me that policymaking starts and ends in the communities most affected. It is not handed down from the powers that be, it is pushed up from the grassroots. And real servants, real public servants, know when to reflect the will of the people. This community is gathered here today to urge, to demand, that leaders find a site for the Refuge Center that respects the history and heritage of this homeland, our mainland. Enough has been stolen, enough has been lost, enough has been desecrated. The people will not accept further damage to the land. On the contrary, as unyielding as the tides that surround us, we will never stop advocating for the rights of these families to resume the stewardship of their land. Returning and protecting the heritage of our mainland must take priority over the construction, rather the destruction, brought about by this firing range. We the people are watching for you to do the right thing, to find a site for this refuge that respects the land and its first peoples. Thank you.
Situs Masi, Josh. Thanks for coming back home. Next we have, is Rachel Davis? You're recognized.
Hafide. Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Davis, daughter of Tomas Bijado and great-great-granddaughter of Ritidian original landowners, Ana Matanani Magdalenen, Benigno Leon Guerrero Flores, and Dolores Martinez Flores. For generations, our family has called Ritidian home. is not just a plot of land or a stretch of beach. It's a repository of our memories, the cradle of our heritage, and the sanctuary of our souls. My family, custodians of the Ritidian legacy, owned parts of this land, and it was on this very soil that myself, along with my father, cousins, and now my children, are raised amidst the whispers of the coconut palms and the endless lullaby of the hymns of the waves, filled with the strength of years enduring blood, sweat, and tears on this very land we call home. As a child, I was fortunate enough to experience the magic of Ritidian firsthand. It wasn't merely a place to play or swim. It was a sacred canvas where bonds of families were painted with the vibrant hues of laughter, where the lessons of respect for nature were etched into our hearts with every grain of sand beneath our feet, with no fear in mind carrying off the strength of our sainas. Ritidian isn't just a piece of real estate. It's a testament to the resilience of our culture and the strength of our connections. It's where we learn to be one with this earth, to honor the spirits of our ancestors, and to safeguard the treasures of our island home for generations to come. Every shell, every stone, every sigh of the wind carries with it the echoes of our lineage, a lineage intertwined with the very fabric of this land. Throughout my life, I've had the privilege of traveling all over the world, experiencing different cultures and lands, and yet amidst all the wonders I've ever encountered, it was always Ritidian that tugged at my heartstrings, beckoning me back home, infusing the rich culture into my artistry and my life. And now as we confront the relentless march to protect our land, the sanctity of our waters and Ritidian hangs precariously in the hands of our leaders. Our family's beach land faces threats from forces beyond our control, and forces that see only profit margins and infrastructure, but fail to recognize the intrinsic value of this truly sacred space. I implore you, esteemed members of this committee, to recognize the importance of strengthening protections for Ritidian and similar for the rest of our island. Let us not be blinded by the lure of short-term gains, but instead, let us be guided by the wisdom of our ancestors and the responsibility we bear to our future generations. Ritidian isn't just a patch of sand and sea, it's a legacy worth preserving, a legacy that speaks to the very souls of Guam. Let us stand together in defense of our sacred lands and waters, not just for ourselves, but for all who will come after us, seeking solace and inspiration in the embrace of our island home. Thank you.
Masi, Rachel, for your testimony. Okay, next we have Elisa Silverio, James Wolford, Monica Flores.
Hafa Senator Perez, Senator Kanata, Senator Barnett, and Senator Taitagui. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Monica Flores. I'm a core organizer with Proteji Latexan Save Ritidian, and it's for a devastating reason that we're here today. And it's in that devastation that we're also honored to stand here in solidarity with the descendants of the original landowners of Latexan, who've been fighting for the return of their homeland now for many generations. Just want to thank you, Senator, for introducing this resolution, because in what really seems to be a period of overwhelming silence from the executive branch. For years now, we have cried to many administrations, and it's really been this legislature, the legislature that has spoken for the people time and time again. And so we're really grateful. We're really grateful for you to introduce this, because the silence is unbearable. The silence has been unbearable while we're watching the clearing, the destruction of the northern coastline in real time, the militarization of Latexan in real time. Leaders have remained silent. And we will look back at this many, many years from now, and we will remember who chose to stay silent and who chose to speak out. And those who stayed silent will probably hold a lot of regret in their hearts for having said nothing while this destruction was taking place. And not only saying nothing, but being complicit to this destruction and ongoing oppression. The US military has had a devastating impact on Guam's landscape, and the relocation of Marines continues a very long history of harm inflicted on the people and environment of Guam due to military activity. And it's really interesting that the refuge was established because of the violence to the land brought by the military. The introduction of the brown tree snake after World War II, a stowaway in military cargo, caused the extinction of 12 of Guam's native bird species and the local extermination of several more. Habitat destruction and fragmentation have been driven out, have caused the birds and other species to be driven out by the military. And this whole refuge was established for that reason. This land was stolen from these families for that very reason. And now, to protect these species and protect this environment, it's getting just thrown out the window. It's all being just thrown out the window for the firing range. And so now, not only are we watching the violence that's already, or not only are we aware of the violence that's already occurred on this landscape, we're watching more violence happen. And the relocation of these refuge facilities is even another layer of injustice and violence. And on top of all of this, the Navy has failed in its commitment to protect thousands of acres of habitat, and now we're watching the destruction of that habitat for this firing range. And ongoing construction of the ranges themselves pose threats to tree species, plant species, animal species, but we're also looking at the threat of our aquifer. All of this is at risk, and now the relocation of this refuge is going to also cause a lot of damage, environmental and cultural destruction. And I actually have 3 images that I wanted to share. I thought it was really important hearing Maria Hernandez May talk about the land that belonged to her great-grandparents. This is the land right here. We're looking at this image right now. Where this refuge facility currently sits is on the very property that was stolen from her family. And this is the view of that property from the back of the machine gun range. The very back of the machine gun range, this is the view. You're going to look over that refuge, you're going to look over the ocean, and on a great day, you're going to see Rhoda. And they're going to tear all of that down to build a new complex, a new refuge complex, right next to the Arunau landowners. They're looking at 2 roads, 2 potential roads, 2 historic trails, which pose threats to ancestral burials, as well as plants that are cultural resources in this area. So since it's really devastating to hear Maria sit here today with her children and her mother and her cousin and talk about this land they've been finding back. This is it. This is the picture of it right here that's going to, and this refuge will be destroyed and moved to another location. Can we look at the next image, please? So this, sorry, it's a little skewed, but the blue line represents the areas they're considering for the new roads. And as you can see, they cut clear through the refuge property. They cut across land that was taken from their families to protect these species. They're going to cut through habitat, and they're going to cut through culturally sensitive areas that contain ancestral remains. Can you please go to the next image? This is an image that was prepared by the Navy last April in 2023. They had a comment period for the programmatic agreement memo associated with the relocation of these facilities. Of course, we know right after they released this, we were hit by a super typhoon. And they did not pause or close that comment period. And so when no comments were submitted by the end of June, as we were recovering from Typhoon Maiwar, they thought nobody had a comment about this. And they decided to move forward. But this map is important because it's a part of that PA memo, and just looking at it, you can see all of the critical archaeological studies that are associated with this relocation. There are several archaeological studies that show how highly sensitive this area is, that contain the remains of our ancestors and the evidence, the sacred evidence of their lives. Thank you so much. Those are the ends of my images. We can take those down. Senor, thank you very much. And thank you to the staff who helped me make sure that we could show those today. I thought it was very important to have these visuals and to remember that the whole reason why this refuge was built in the first place was because of the devastating impacts to our ecosystem, because the military brought the brown tree snake here. And now that's all being thrown out the window. All of that land that they stole to protect these species is being thrown out the window for this firing range. It doesn't make any sense. And it's coming at a cost to the Arunau families. It's coming at a cost to the remaining untouched properties and sacred areas there that will have to be cleared for a new road and facility to be built. You know, if the military wants to say that they are good stewards of the land, if our own community is going to tell us, the people who are fighting to protect this land, that the military takes better care of it than us, we need to correct that. That's a lie. That's an absolute lie, because we are not the ones clearing over 1,200 acres for this firing range and clearing this land for a new refuge. That's going to cause more environmental destruction and cultural destruction. Relocating the Marines from Okinawa to Guam has resulted in the destruction of more than 12,000 acres of the last best remaining limestone forests. These forests are known, some of them are in the Guam Wildlife Refuge. They were already set aside for mitigation for habitat loss and disturbance by the Air Force Base. They provide the last suitable habitat for these species, but they also are sacred lands to our people, to the original landowners and to all of the people of Guam. If we're going to talk about security and keeping our islands safe, we need to talk about genuine security. Lately, we've been hearing the governor throw around genuine security and what it means, but it's actually a framework that was developed by a group of feminist scholars. And the way that it's being thrown around reflects that people don't understand what that framework is. What is genuine security? Genuine security is not national security or military security. In fact, militarism and military occupation undermines what security really means for the people and the environment. So genuine security means they come from these main principles. The physical environment must be able to sustain human and natural life. People's basic needs for food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education must be guaranteed. People's fundamental human dignity should be honored, and cultural identities should be respected, and people and the natural environment should be protected from avoidable harm. In no way does this relocation and the current proposals of the military show that they are trying to reduce harm. This is another layer of violence and injustice to our land, to our ancestors, to the landowners, and we must demand that it stop immediately. And so we thank you, Senator, for introducing this resolution. We hope that every member of this body supports it. And we have to remember that, you know, even if we're removed from this land, even if many generations later we've been removed from these lands, you know, whether it's Anapsan, Taragi, Letexan, Sumai, we are still connected to that land. We still carry the grief and the rage and the stories and the care for that land. The people who buried those ancestors who are laid to rest, and every family who lived on that land and took care of that land since then would care about the protection of those burials, would care about the protection of that ecosystem for every future generation that calls Guahan home. And that's why we're here today. Sainamasi. Thank you very much.
Sainamasi, Maneka. Thank you. Yes, yeah, so I do have ties to the northern part of Guam, and it's just really is what it, you know, made me become environmentalist. Just that connection to the land and our ancestors. And so thank you for being here and carrying on this responsibility and legacy to protect it. And unfortunately, you know, as much as, you know, we want to, you know, regain that connection to the land more palpably, I think too, you know, I just, you know, hope that one day we don't have to keep fighting for this, right? We need to have this connection much restored. I think that's so important. Thank you. Angela Santos, thank you.
Senadora. My name is Guausi Angela Santos. Chelon Onge Santos defunto, Senador Onge Santos. Gaigi I familako ngini Chelosi Doris. Yes, agwana jani nanao. Man la nanao ade was ginin I Jonya Kurasona Gaigi Jogini. Then Kantoro ni I Cheloho ni her fighting spirit. So if I may ask that I step aside and let her speak on this, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, you may.
Refuge waktu para uno talo pemendestrosa ni ochutano ya Pues office ni temo por no pechone con lo
Guajo na nana Angel Santos tiu aspreba ni para fan halame aje para umagustay tano ni para firing range sa priority landowners because they own the land and you don't take away land that belongs to the and some other people of long time. They own it. So why do people, outsiders, have to come in and take over the land in which they are not entitled to it? So we have to, bear with all people to just leave their land alone. Jesus Masi.
Seduz Masi, Ten Amanda Santos, for being here. And yes, the spirit of Angel Santos and your whole family, thank you so much for your support. Next we have Tewid, if you would like to provide any testimony.
No, thank you. Afade Senators, thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for supporting this resolution or putting this resolution together. My name is Tewid Marisbang. I'm with Pacific Nation Equities. We focus on equitable and sustainable development, particularly when it comes to economy and people. So I really only have three things, and really one is we need to make sure that the land gets returned back to the original owners. That's an absolutely must. It's unacceptable that we're here in 2024 and the land is still not returned back to the original owners. If anything, that should be a priority. We should be mad. We should be frustrated. We should be angry that land is not returned back to the original owners. I don't understand why not enough people on this island are mad and enraged that this is still happening. Secondly, one is we need to talk more about the environment. When we talk about destroying another part of a refuge to build another facility within a refuge, it does not make any sense to me. It's completely mind-boggling. You have a refuge that is supposed to be, from my understanding, a refuge is supposed to be safe, sacred, and you're supposed to feel like you're a refuge, protected. But here we are destroying another part of the land in a refuge to build a refuge. It does not make any sense to me. So from a fundamental perspective, we need to think about that. It does not make any sense to me. So if it doesn't make any sense and it involves destruction of land within a refuge that is supposed to be help ecosystems thrive, then we need to stop that. We need to make sure that it's unacceptable and it doesn't happen. Thirdly, from a sustainable development, but I just want to go back to Nate Flores' particular statement. The refuge was built in the first place so that way the ecosystem is protected, is safe, and it's cherished because it's precious. And here we are destroying it. It's completely mind-boggling. But from a sustainable perspective, if we allowed the destruction of ecosystem within a refuge so that we can build a building that has implications. Where are we going to get those minerals and those materials to build this new facility? Guess what? We're going to have to extract it from Dedido. We're going to have to extract it from Zigo. So in my mind, that means more extraction is going to happen, more unsustainable development. So just from a fundamental sustainable development perspective, it's not sustainable. And so if we allow that to happen now, it's never going to stop. We have to make it stop somewhere. And this resolution, we must make this resolution stop this further unsustainable development. We're on a small little island. It's 34 miles, right? 34 miles, 7 miles wide. I think it's 30 miles long, 7 miles wide. And so anything that comes to development, destruction on a small little island, we need to really look at that with a microscope. Like anything that involves extraction. I don't know if you guys ever been to Dedido or Zigo or Hawaiian Rock, but that whole entire part of the island has been extracted, excavated, so we can continue this unsustainable development. It's unacceptable, it's unsustainable, and we need to make it stop. But really 3 things. We need to return the land back, make sure our environment is safe, protected, especially when it comes to a refuge or really on an island. And thirdly, we must ensure that that anything that we do is sustainable. And any construction, any destruction that involves on an island it's not sustainable. We need to just say stop. Just stop. Don't allow it. That's all I have. Thank you, Senators, for your time. Appreciate it.
Tsutus Masi Tewid, for your testimony, and a very sensible testimony. Tsutus Masi. Next, we have David Cabrera.
Afade, Tirawami, senators, and the people of Guam that showed up here today. I'm here from Saipan, and matujupago na dia pa benai toto Guam obvio to give the people of Guam support and to show some solidarity all the way from the CNMI in support of this resolution. The people of the CNMI are looking towards the leadership here in Guam to set the kind of precedent that we need to preserve these significant cultural, historic sites. Whether you make the right decisions or the wrong decisions, your decisions echo throughout the Northern Mariana Islands, and you set the precedent in the way we handle these situations moving forward. So the burden and the weight, the charge of the preservation of our cultural practices, our cultural places, fall on you all. And, I don't want to make your jobs harder, but the pressure's on. So we appreciate this resolution. I speak for myself and for many people with the same sentiment in the CNMI. We appreciate this resolution, and we hope that more positive action is brought forward, and we see and have an opportunity, more opportunity for the people of Guam to speak and to be heard, more importantly. So thank you for your time.
Tsutus Masi, David, for your testimony and solidarity. Next, we have Melanie Guerrero. I can call up the rest. Kenneth Guerrero. You're not, if you want to come up, you feel free to come up. Lou Bajado. Amanda Santos, I'm sorry, my apologies, you already came up. Doris Iriarte. John Iriarte. Christina Flores Lebron. And if anybody else wants to come up that I haven't spoken, Bobby Beneventi, and anybody else who would like to come up. Okay. All right, so. Oh, thanks. Okay, I believe Melanie, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Sabina, Perez, Senator, Senator Kanata, Senator Barnett, Senator Tello Tairagui. I thank you so much for also showing up here today to listen to our cries. As I'm sitting back there listening to everybody's story, I'm just like, my whole body is just so heartbroken that this is happening to us, you know. As I live here, I was born here, my families do have lands here, and I'm sure that people watching feel the same feeling that everyone that's here today feel. Because we're rooted here. We are here. This is our island. We're rooted here. We have all kinds of connections to everyone around our island. And I can't even help myself to like be so heartbroken about everything that is happening around us. And I know that you have your jobs, and I know that it's very difficult in itself to please everybody, but all we're asking is for you to now fight for us, right? Because we entrust you the power to do so. We believe in each and every one of you that have been elected in this body. And I know that there's so many promises that are being made, but what I see is that I see promises that are not being fulfilled, right? Promises I'm not saying directly from you guys, because I know how hard you work to get those fundings, right? To fight also for our people, and why you're introducing this today for us to hear us out as well. I understand that. But when we look back to, like everybody spoke about today, that the preservation for these lands to be used for the wildlife, and now today, so many years later, they're asking you guys to take that away from the wildlife and all the sacrifices that the families had to make to give that up, and still fighting for it. I help families here on Guam in homes, in lands, and I'm so, so proud to do that. I'm so grateful that I'm blessed to be able to put families in their lands, you know, put families in homes. And I think that every one of you sitting in that body today should also feel that, because you're connected to somebody here. You're connected to, we live in 200 and some miles of island, right? Like, how much more do you want it to be destroyed? And this is just not this is your obligation, because we gave you the privilege to do that. And I hope that you would take that very personally for your own families, and for us that trust you to help us, because we are seeking your help to do that. We are seeking your help to be the louder voices that we expect you to be, because we trust you to do that. And I'm just hoping, and I'm very thankful for the work that you guys are putting in to do that, and I hope that you can take that home today and remember the families that are sitting behind you here today, and take that home with you, and really think that a lot of broken promises were made, and that you guys are always fighting to, like, how many times have we heard, like, cuts, right? You never get enough for education. You never get enough for safety. You never get enough for all these things that we're all fighting for, that we entrust you to do for us. Even you're affected by it. We're affected by it. And you have short times to do that, to prove it to us, that give you the privilege to do that. And I hope you remember that, why you were sitting there. And I hope you remember us and the families here that are fighting for their lands, and they're fighting for preservation of those lands. And if they're going to be, they're being neglected, on their lands being returned, they're sacrificing for what, right? For you to come back today and ask them to say, oh, let's move the wildlife. After so many years of their sacrifice, now you want to ask them to do that? And what does it matter anyways if we get bombed by a nuke? Does it matter that you build all these sites to protect us? When that's not going to matter, but what's going to matter is that remember the history that we're fighting to save our lands from all the environmental impact and destruction and the peace that we want in our own island so that we can all live here together without all the diseases that are going to come out of it, without all the destruction. We are just hoping for a better island, and we hope that you can continue to hear our cries louder and that it sits in you, each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
Masi, Melanie, for being here and for your heartfelt testimony. And yes, we have been fighting alongside. I think our voices need to be louder.
Thank you. Yes.
So if I can ask those that testified earlier, if we, I forgot to ask the panel to ask questions, but maybe you can stick around for a little bit. Thanks. Kenneth Guerrero. Okay. Lou Bajado, you're recognized.
Half a day and good afternoon, Senator Sabina, Senator Roy, Senator Chris, Senator Joanne, and Senator Cello. I'm so happy that you are all here present. I know you have many other very more important issues probably to address, but this issue of returning the land is dear and near to our hearts. And as I guess I would like to also say that I'm a direct descendant of Latexan. My grandfather is Benigno, and my grandparents, Benigno and Dolores Flores. And they're one of the, of course, the original landowners whose land has been condemned at the time 60 years ago. And then my great-grandmother is Ana Matanani Pangilinan, and her land sits at where the current Refuge office is. And so, but as I am thinking and sitting here, I'm thinking of not only are we fighting for our lands, so we also remember and recall in support of other families, local families who too are in the same predicament and have been waiting and hoping for the return of their lands, who have been taken by the military and the federal government. I mean, and I recall this one family from the Eaglesfield family, where we were also in support of them, where, they have 100 acres of land there that belong to them, they're original landowners, yet they're not able to get that land. You have 4 generations sitting in, one home. They have to continue to expand that one home to accommodate 4 generations. It breaks my heart that they have hundreds of acres that belong to them, yet they cannot get title to that land. And so that's something that we really need to think about not only just us at Latexan, but all the indigenous people, the families that need to return to their land. Land is life, right? Are you saying that? Land is life, land is sacred. The cost of land is it's priceless, and it's becoming beyond control, beyond the affordability. And so, these lands belong to our indigenous people, and our land was taken 6 years ago, condemned, 30 years later, it was taken a second time by the Fish and Wildlife. And at that time, we were, in our adult stage, and my cousins and I, our aunts and uncles, our grandparents, they've all gone. You may recall, those of you who have been fighting in this fight, I mean, even with Defunto Angel Santos, I was in his presence, and Ed Beneventi, all the fighters. I'm so humbled to see his mom, Mrs. Santos, here. It just warms my heart. Signed, God bless you. And so, again, it's just, we've been here for decades, senators. We've been here many times in front of this esteemed august body, even when it was in the old legislature. We've been in front of all the many governors, from Governor Ada, who even at the time when the refuge was taken, was established or deemed, although it was deemed excess, it was then taken from our families, right, to become a refuge. I've always said at that time that this was a farce. I mean, in a nutshell, that land is not habitable it's not conducive to the survival of endangered species because of the brown tree snakes. And so I continue to stress that point and say, wow, this is an actual farce, that they're just using this as a reason to hold the land so they don't have to give it back to the indigenous people. And 30 years later, my words are right. Where are the propagation of the endangered species and all? I mean, I don't need to repeat all that. You guys have heard it all. But I'm saying to allow, this is an opportunity now that the land is now not needed for the refuge. And now, perhaps it's the time to give it back to us. Is this the time to take a stand and take it back? I mean, what do we need to do? I mean, do we need to stand in front of that gate and get shot at to make an effort to get the land back? I mean, someone needs to die to get our land back? I mean, Senators, I'm just asking you, and I wish there were more of you here because I know that it's not just, I mean, I'm sure they have this in their heart, but maybe they don't. Because there's been many of them have been in the legislature for many years too, and they've heard us, and they're still not here. We really need our leaders to stand up for us, stand for the indigenous people, stand for us, the Chamorros, and give us back our land. I'm so sorry. We've been we've been trying to be very gracious, very respectful. Many times this is all we're doing. We're just doing this. It's like, all talk. And I know, it's also tied into other things, right? Our hands are tied as well. I mean, with the status that we're in. Anyways, I'm just not going to prolong this. I know you guys all know where we're coming from, and we're just, we continue to pray. I even pray to my sinus in the consecration of the Mass every day that they would provide that Maskaina Hamona, lead us through and return our lands. And I want to thank you all again for being here. And I want to thank everyone for being here. I mean, gosh, it just really warms my heart. I'm so humbled to see all the support and the support for this bill. Thank you so much.
Masi, Lou, for your words. And when you talk about farce, right? So, they went through all these rules for the Endangered Species Act, but they did not even follow it to, protect one of the most rarest trees. So they allowed the destruction of a forest, when that is the very thing that is needed to preserve it, is the forest around it. So when you talk about farce, that it does resonate, considering the actions that have been taken to, overlook what is really needed to protect what is said to protect these, species. So, all right. So thank you for your testimony. And so I'm not sure who's next. Doris Ariarty. Is that Doris? John Ariarty. Let's see, who else do we have? Christina Flores Lebrun. And then Camden May and Barbara Benaventis next, following it.
Alpha Day, senators, and everybody here today. Thank you, Senator Sabina Perez, for holding this. I just wanted to say I'm just honored to be here with also other people who really care about this. And I didn't prepare much for today, but I am also a descendant of the original landowners. My auntie Lou Bajado, who just spoke, is my mom's sister. So I'm the great-granddaughter of Benigno L.G. Flores. My dad is from the States, and so I don't know, when I got to Guam, I was like Poaso Chamorro, like I felt like I was new, I was kind of different. And my family didn't make me feel that way at all, and the waters and the land never made me feel that way. It was like when I went to Ritidian, everything just, my identity, like who I am as a chamarita, like everything just came together. And that's what's so beautiful about Guam and our culture is like we are so gracious, like my auntie said, but then there's also that side of us that, is prideful, and we don't necessarily want to be so, I don't know if narcissistic is the word, but just at some point we have to say enough is enough, and just stand up for what we truly believe in and what is the right thing to do. And I know many of you have traveled around the world, and you know that this really wouldn't be okay in many other places. And the fact that we are a territory of the U.S., second-class citizens in many different ways, it just deters us from having the same, like being able to put our foot down and say no. And I think that's why we're here today with our shirts and our signs in solidarity with others, just to show how much we care. And it really brings tears to our eyes and our hearts and our souls. That is where I'm a teacher, and that's where I want to take, my son, my nephews, and our nannies in the family to learn about our great-great-grandfather and grandmother and all of the, Sina that came before us, to learn our language and to, my mom just tells me story after story about Letexen before the roads were built and the way the finhihi would fly and the turtles would swim, and it was just, it's so different, So when I came back to Guam 2014, it was just, and then since that's been 10 years now, and to go driving down that road up to Ritidian and to see the destruction that is there, I mean, it is just, it's heartbreaking, it's heart-wrenching as you're continuously hearing. So again, I know it may seem repetitive, but I truly am moved by everyone in this room. Like I said, I didn't come to necessarily have an oral testimony today, but I'm so grateful that I did, because this is what it takes. It takes people who just truly love their land, their culture, their heritage. And to want to preserve it, and there's so much more to the scientific environmental side that I'm still a baby and a nanny and learning and all of that. But I know that it's just amazing that not even family, people that are not necessarily tied to the land through familial roots, they just care, because we're all indigenous to this land, whether it's 10% Chamorro or not. Some people who just grew up here in Guam are just like so connected to the island. It's all we have, So we just have to really work together to protect it. And Saina Ma'asi for having me here today and listening, and especially for creating this resolution and putting so many efforts forward. We really see those leaders that care and genuinely appreciate you. So thank you.
Saina Ma'asi, Christy, welcome back home.
Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Camden May. What is your name? James. Did you sign it? Did you sign it? James? Okay, so just say your name. Okay. I'd like to Bobby Beneventi. Maybe if you can. Sorry, she's on the next. I'll recognize you after, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Bobby Beneventi, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, senators. Thank you for being here. I think this is the first time I've ever come to testify with this current body. I've done in previous sessions on various topics, but recently it's about the land, and it's about what the military is doing to continue to destroy our land, take away our land, not give back our land. And I submitted a written testimony. However, and I thought maybe that would be good enough, but when I was watching you guys live stream, I thought, you know what, as unwell as I feel, it's important that I come down here to at least sit with the original landowners and other supporters here in our community who believe so strongly and who have fought so many years to try to make things right. I've never met you in person, Senator. Good to see you. I better call in for dinner because I've got like a million things I want to say, and I know there's not time for all that. But I do want to point out or read out something that caught my attention last night because it, throughout my life's experience, I've always had to ask myself whether what I'm listening to or what I'm reading is fact or fallacy. And that's always a challenge because people with more resources and larger connections seem to have a more influential voice than someone like me who's from Dededo. I'm a wife of 50 years to my husband who's a fisherman. So we've experienced over time what it's like to be kicked off the land in Litekzan because we didn't belong. I've witnessed and heard stories from my husband about how a military chopper would hover over his 12-foot boat when he's fishing with a friend and told to get out of the waters, get away from the reef by Litekzan, because I think they said there was some kind of exercise going on and that maybe they're putting themselves in harm's way. My children, we have 3 adult children, 6 grandchildren, and a great-grandson. And it is very important to me and my family that the land is available to them to learn what I have learned from my families about caring for the land, about fishing and farming, and about teaching some really important life skills to all the generations that come after us. I was reading the governor's Facebook page. I was hoping I'd get his attention. And she talks about, she writes about, or someone writes it for her, about going to the museum to see the replica of the marlin that Greg Perez caught, and how it was a world record weighing 1,152 pounds. And in her page, she writes, Guam holds a unique place in the world with a culture that spans over 4,000 years. Our traditions, our values, and our way of life are deeply rooted in this rich history, and fishing has always been at the heart of it. It's a tradition passed down through generations, a heritage that connects us to our ancestors and to the bountiful waters that surround us. Excuse me. She says, or she writes, made this about the exhibit at the Guam Museum. She writes, may this celebration serve as a reminder of who we are, where we come from, and the bright future that lies ahead. So I'm calling her on it as a fact. I'm going to trust that what is written in her page is in fact sincere and genuine, about taking pride about who we are as a people, and that we as a Chamorro people and people who have welcomed so many different people from other islands and other lands and other cultures to make Guam their home and do it with respect and with reciprocity. I come from the family Jai. My grandmother is from Milian Jai. My grandfather is from the Gotsu family. So Greg Perez's fish, I could maybe own some of that because, it's in the blood, right? My husband is a fisherman, and one of the things that he's always telling me, when you go to these public hearings, could you not say my name? So I'm going to refer to him as my husband. My husband is a wonderful fisherman. My husband takes care of the land. He's now a farmer, and he now does what he can to ensure that we have sustainable food, that we not just keep for ourselves, but we share with our neighbors and family and friends. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, except that, you know, what is fact and what is fiction? Is it a fact that the military's taking of Liteksan was really to have it serve as a preserve, to protect endangered species, to make sure the land is not contaminated and all that? Well, we've seen otherwise, right? I stand in support of this resolution, and I stand in support of the families getting their land back. I'm not a Liteksan beach owner. My husband inherited land in Jigo, and so we're very concerned about the contamination that may happen, that the water is at risk. We're concerned that with all the land that's being cleared off, there are more, like wild pigs, for example, encroaching onto our property, digging up all our fruits and trees and destroying our land because there's nowhere else for them to go, perhaps, because now they're moving more inland from where they may have been living. I'm reminded of a letter that I received from Angel when he was wrongfully incarcerated. And he said that our work, there's still a lot of work to be done. And we owe it to our kids to not give up. And all this stuff, you know, there's a lot of people that I can honestly say have the same sentiments as we in this room do. That it is wrong that our land has been taken away from Chamorro hands, that it is wrong that the land isn't being returned. But you know, coming to these legislative halls, it's not easy. You've got these televisions and broadcast live, and everybody's kind of watching you and wondering if we're going to ever say anything articulate. And I'm like really struggling with that, because when I feel the pain and anger about what's been going on our island, I mean, the four-letter words come to mind first and foremost. And then I say, oh my God, and then I pray, right? But I retired from the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. I worked 38 years in government. Not just in that department, but one or two other places. And I see a lot of sadness, the displacement of Chamorro families and other Pacific Islander families, and the increase in the number of people who are homeless, the high rate of suicide. I've talked to many youth over the many years I've worked in families, and have lost family members in the same way that tragically other families have lost. And the one thing I do in my heart totally believe, is that when we are displaced from our land, when we are disconnected from our culture, when we are brought up to think, made to believe that our language is not important, and a sign of potential success in the world is when you speak without an accent, without a Chamorro accent. And I mean, all of that really does play a strong part in where we are at today, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. I don't know what it will take to have our leaders walk the talk and do it consistently, not just a few months before the primary kicks in, right? I've got my personal feelings about every single one of you, because I'm not out here, but I do pay attention. And I really count on you guys to stay true to the Chamorro people and the people who've made Guam home. There's no half-stepping it anyway. We're getting screwed big time, and that's the polite word for describing what's going on to Chamorro families, to local families. I remember my mom used to say, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and I never understood, what the heck are you talking about, Mom? She used to tell me that when I was a teenager, and I see it happening. But we really have to stand together, and I know some of you are nodding out because it's kind of late maybe, or maybe I'm boring. Maybe all this stuff, it's like, shoot, I've heard this over and over again for the last 40 years or whatever. But it is really unfair that original landowners, families like the Latexan owners, have to keep coming back over and over and over to say the same things, to stand for the same principles and rights, the right to their land. And all of this testimony and stories told are in your hands. You guys have a lot of power, maybe not a lot of power, more power than the power of the people whom you are to represent. But anyway, I'm now getting younger people fannying me, so I'm like, I guess I'm kind of Sina right now. But I do have a brother that's turning 80 tomorrow. So until I hit 80, maybe I'll just leave the honors to him, to being the Sina of my family. Sizuz Masi.
Sizuz Masi, Bobby, for coming here even though you're sick. And yeah, it's so true that a lot of what's happening to us Chamorro people is pervading, this colonization is pervasive. And it underpins a lot of the problems that's affecting our society today. So I do agree with you there. So at this time, I want to allow my colleagues to ask questions. I know Maneka has to leave, so maybe we can put a pause on the testimony at this time. And if there's any questions of the panel that came before, Senator Tadigui, did you have questions? Did you want to ask? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know usually after a panel is finished and the next come up, we have an opportunity to speak. But, it's very emotional right now. And a lot of hurt in the room. A lot of good memories. Especially I look at my family, the Bijaros, because back in the early 80s, I was down at Ritidian every Sunday with the family. That I was once part of, and I still feel very close to them. And I know the importance of this beautiful land that should be given back to the family. And I've always been very supportive of returning the land back to the people, not just Ritidian, but all lands. The government is taking over, using certain lands for the safety and well-being of the island on a military perspective. But it just boggles me why they take the best lands. And they say they need this particular land for one reason, but the only one I can think of when I grew up in Anderson Air Force Base with my parents, when my father was in the military, that the best beach was Taragi Beach. It was where everybody went, and that's why the military liked that piece of land over there. But there's more to that. It's about the endangered species. It's about the plants, medicinal plants that are in that area. Maneka, I really like to commend you for continuing to be an advocate for not just yourself and your beliefs, but those who come to you seeking help, to ask you to help them tell us on a scientific or even a well-educated viewpoint of this important piece of property. You brought up a map earlier, and what I just don't understand is why is the military moving that facility into a different location that's still called the preserves, but why first are they doing it? Do you know why?
Yes, so the view that I showed earlier was the view of the refuge from behind the firing range where the machine gun range is. So that's the largest of the 5 ranges. It's the last one to finish construction. It is the one that's been held up the longest because of the cereanthes, the endangered tree that's there. Right. but also it's the biggest. It's caused the most destruction. It's the biggest of all the 5 ranges. And at the very back of that range, when you look down, that's the view right onto that refuge facility, which is the property that belonged to this family behind us.
Okay.
And so that's where, that's the other end of the surface danger zone.
Okay, right.
And not only are they going to take that area, they want to also take 3 miles out into the ocean for 273 days out of the year as an extension of that surface danger zone. So they're not just taking where the firing range is. The surface danger zone extends over the wildlife refuge area, over Letexan, and then over into the ocean 3 miles. Now, where the refuge currently sits, that's the edge of the firing range complex, and then the buffer zone ends after a while toward the left. And where they want to build the new access road is further into the property. So it's going to cross, they're looking at 2 potential sites. Both are historic trails. Both should not be cleared. Both are through ranch lands that existed there before the war. And both are through burial sites and culturally sensitive areas, and also habitat areas. And so it doesn't make any sense. They're going to tear down that whole existing facility and rebuild it. And so one of the areas is called the Jeep Trail, which is a historic trail. And then the other area is closer to the Arunau side, literally sitting on the very edge of the, so here's the Arunau property, here's the Letexan property, right on the border. So it'll butt up right against the Arunau. It'll literally, where the Arunau access road is, that's where the other potential location is. And so the maps that I showed you are from the Navy's programmatic agreement memo that went out last year. It went out at the end of April, and we had until June to submit comments. But of course, in the middle of all of that, we were hit with the super typhoon, and nobody submitted comments. I mean, we usually have a robust comment campaign around these things, and we missed this one because it was around this time. And so now the Navy is just telling the public, oh, we didn't receive any comments, but they're not contextualizing it as to why they may not have received comments at this time. But we have to also recognize that this is a flawed process to begin with, that them collecting comments and us doing a comment campaign is not the end-all, be-all to this problem, that it's a flawed process, that they're just checking off the boxes to say that they're engaging the community so they can move forward with these activities. That process is extremely problematic, and that's why this hearing is also so incredibly important, because it's allowing us, those of us who were not able to provide comment last year, to put on public record how we really feel about this relocation of this facility, what it means for the original landowners, and also that it means that they're basically going to build a whole new road, a whole new parking lot, a whole new office building where they shouldn't be. They do not belong there in the remaining parts of Letexan. You know, if you're thinking of, these are ranch lands where people, there's still lemai trees that their ancestors planted there that still exist there from their ranches, and that's the land. These are the lands that are going to be cut through for the new road, parking lot, and building. And they don't, and so the maps that I showed are specifically from that memo. And I shared the link and the document with Senator Perez's staff, so that can be circulated to all of you here today, and also to the body in your deliberation for this resolution, which we hope passes very soon.
Thank you so much for that. And you're right, you know, provide comment, many of us didn't even have power, let alone a cell phone that actually worked during that time. So it's very disingenuous for them not to delay the comment period, for the military not to do that. I mean, this is really wrong, well, you know,
yes,
and it's very, like I said, disingenuous of them.
Absolutely.
We tried to, like you said earlier, I think, be good stewards. Someone said that, you know, to be a good steward, but yet they don't reciprocate, you know, that same sentiments. the area, okay, so, and this is the same property that the military continues to use as an excuse to hold on to the land because of that area being so important for wildlife as well as plants, as, you know, the berry. I mean, they use that same excuse to hold on to it.
Right.
And now all of a sudden it's not that important anymore.
Yeah.
Now we can build a parking lot, another building, and then allow that area where the building's at now to just be in the line of firing range, which brings me to the next question with regards to the firing range. Wasn't that ever in the comment period when the firing range was being brought up? That did they say they would have to move that?
Yes.
Okay, so it was in that period, right? No, I'm talking about, this was in the Senator Perez, I believe, when we went to the firing range. Was it the 35th Guam legislature that we went? So it was around 2019?
So they
Around
did
that time?
say that they would have to relocate the refuge facility, and they would want to keep it on the refuge, but they did not have the plans yet.
On how to move it.
On how to move it. And even these two options, they're not settled on which option, either the Jeep Road or the one closer to Aruna, that they're gonna use for this new access area. And I really appreciate you saying it's disingenuous, and it's under that same vein that I'm saying that this is to actually give us access to Letexan. That's why they need to relocate it. It's to ensure our access is still, that we can still go there. But it's a farce. It's really,
Well, what is the Wildlife and Refuge saying about this? I mean, did they provide comments to this?
I'm not aware of the of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife's comments to the military. They are in a few agreements. There is a memorandum of understanding that they have with the Wildlife Refuge. I believe you all have a copy of the memorandum, which basically they are supposed to help the military with the relocation of this facility. It doesn't make any sense though, because like you said, this refuge was established to protect all of these endangered species. If you walk in Letexan today, even after Typhoon Mawar, you'll still see lemai trees that are literally 300 years old. And those are the kinds of trees that they're gonna tear through. You know, trees that are habitat for endangered tree snails, or trees that are resting habitat for the fanihi when they come from the north. All of that, they're wiping through all of that to relocate this refuge. So it doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, what doesn't make any sense is a group of individuals for Wildlife and Refuge are not standing up against this.
Right.
Because they're supposed to protect these areas.
I think it's important to mention too that our organization, Perez Letexan, is actually suing U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Navy for their failure to uphold to that so-called mitigation plan that, as we can see, has failed. And so we're currently in a lawsuit, actually, and I would even suggest that it's also good to wait for the outcome of the lawsuit before they can move forward with any sort of action. We're hoping that might be the outcome.
Thank you, Maneka, for all your research that you're doing again and bring this to our attention and allowing those who are listening to see exactly where the destruction is going to happen. You know, in no means am I, anti-military because I'm bringing this up. This is about our land. This is our identity, who we are. And we don't have a lot of it. You know, we do understand the protection of the United States, protecting, it is the United States.
Right.
Guam is the United States. But even that, there are places on this island within their own, behind the fence that they can utilize and be conscious of our culture, our heritage, our history. Because once you kill that off, our history is gone. I mean, our language is already dying. That's already dying. And then we truly have no identity. We are losing our identity. And every time they take a piece of something that has been historically, we're 4,000 years old, and they take that away, we might as well be called something else other than Guam or even Guahan or even Chamorros. Rename us another name now because we lost who our identity is.
We also should be careful not to say within their footprint, because that's actually how they came to select the Texan in the first place, was that they said it was maintaining it's maintained within their footprint. But as we can see now, it extends way beyond their footprint. It's all of La Texana as well as 3 miles of ocean. And so it's very dangerous to say that. We should question every single thing they do behind the fence and outside of the fence, because it affects our everyday lives.
It does.
And
they're on the aquifer, so we do
That's
have to
right.
question. Yeah,
Absolutely right, Senator.
Yeah,
Thank
I stand
you.
corrected on that.
Thank you so much.
It's just very frustrating at this point in trying to do what we can as a legislature, at least, some of us who really truly believe in protecting our lands. It doesn't make us anti-military. It just makes us conscious of where we come from, and
if I can respond
our
to
history.
that, it's actually really hurtful when we hear people in leadership say that environmental activists are obstructionists. It really doesn't make any sense, because environmental protection is true security. We're not going to have a healthy economy with a bad environment. We're not going to have clean drinking water. There's no security there. And so to say we're obstructionists is ludicrous. We're trying to protect the island for all future generations. We're not trying. It's not that we're anti. Like you said, to sign it off as something as simple as just being anti-American or anti-military, it minimizes what we're really living through every single day as an island that's fraught with poverty, drug addiction, houselessness, and those are all symptoms of our colonial reality and the militarization that happens here. And if we really care about the safety and security of our island, we will care about the environment, because we're not going to have a healthy economy, we're not going to have a healthy community if we don't have a healthy environment. And so, for everybody listening,
amen to that,
Thank you,
Monica.
Senator.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was very well said. I'm going to end it on that one.
Thank you so much.
Because that was very well said. I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
This is Masi, Senator Tadigui. Senator Kanata, if you have any questions. Senator Barnett.
Sidos Masi, Madam Chair. I think I'm just going to start first on this, the labeling, and Monica, to kind of expand on what you said. You said that you don't like it when, did you say when people in leadership throw that term around?
Yeah, when people in leadership say
but you're saying
that activists are obstructionists and anti this and that and the other thing.
I completely agree. And one thing I noticed since I got in as a senator since the beginning of the term, we have seen what I believe is a total collapse and a breakdown in our ability to even discuss these issues with other leaders. And so just going with my experience in this term relative to Eagles Field, the governor and the lieutenant governor routinely, and I mean routinely in press release after press release, said that we were anti-military, said that we were that we were obstructionists. And this was just simply because we were asking questions. And, when I was young, I was inspired, of course, by Defunto Onget. And what I saw in Onget was someone who started out, many said he was radical, right? He jumped the fence. And I think as time went on and his arguments and all the issues that he was exposing, along with Nashon Chamorro, with the passion and the facts, it was very important that all the things they were talking about, turned out to be true. And he went from a figure who was considered radical to, at the latter half of his life, someone who was embraced by not just Chamorros, but people from all walks of life and all ethnicities. And I think it's because they admired the passion that he had to fight for what was right. And there were people who called him anti-American, right? And so it's not lost on me the irony of where we're at here in 2024 and how we've advanced as a people in so many ways. But when you talk about having to come to the legislature, and you said that the legislature has been the body in this government that has listened to the people and in many cases been the voice of the people, I completely agree. But it can't stop here, right? We have to have the support of the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the delegate. And so when we have a governor who And, you know, I'll just say what some of my friends have said, they've said, and I said this on the floor across the hall, that it's almost like we have a naval governor again. And, you know, I don't think anyone here is asking for any of our elected leaders to, you know, burn a flag or whatever. All we're saying is you have to stand up for our people. And when I look back at all the great leaders who have come before us and who have inspired someone like me to run for office, one of the things that inspired me was, you know, from the late Speaker Ampinko to Ongit. I mean, we're talking about entire bodies of our previous legislatures that have supported efforts that are very similar to what we're discussing today. And so when we have a governor who, instead of engaging on the issues, chooses to call names and say we're anti-American, when we have a lieutenant governor who goes before the Chamber of Commerce and says that because we're asking questions about how many septic tanks we're going to put over our aquifer, that we're anti-development and anti-progress. That just doesn't sit well with me. And people, I feel like they really need to pay attention because we are at a critical juncture on our island in so many ways. And if we are not united, which right now we are not, I don't know how well we're going to make it out of this. And so obviously, I feel like I've been consistent, you know. The first political events I ever got into was I hosted the Santos Terlahi rallies, right? And I've covered these issues in the media, and I've come into the legislature. And for me, it's never been a question that as an elected leader, all the ones that I've admired and respected, and they've been on both sides of the aisle, it has been a given that you stand up for the original landowners. It has been a given that you recognize these crimes and these atrocities and these unjust land takings. It has been a given, it has been an obligation that you speak out about the pollution and the desecration that has been committed, you know, at the hands of, the military. And for me, those are always things that were a given when you represent the people of Guam and you consider, you know, our unique and troubled past. And so I just wanted to state for the record that when you talk about people calling names, it's offensive, yes, but for me it's more heartbreaking because it signifies that we don't have that alignment from the top on down. Like we could pass this resolution. I mean, my mind's made up on it, right? But I don't know. I don't know how the governor feels. I don't know how the delegate feels, but I know how they should feel about something like this. So yes, you have my support, and I'm not saying, you know, go protest over at Adelou, but, you know, you're preaching to the choir. You really are, and I just don't want us to slide any further down this hill. I mean, it's a very slippery slope. A lot of what I hear from the administration is that we have to worry about, you know, our security and our safety. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're elected to represent the people of Guam, and we have to worry about the troubles that we have faced. And, you know, if we don't fight against the injustices that we've faced, then we're not going to be very ready to fight against the future injustice. So I commend you guys for continuing to provide this testimony. I know there's a couple times where you said, oh, we've said it so many times and we've heard it a million times. Well, I'm ready to hear it a million more if that's what it takes to get to where we need to go. So, Sidus Masi, Madam Chair, I commend you again for introducing the resolution and the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Sidus Masi, Senator Barnett. Maria, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just biba to that, but also I just wanted to add on to what Nick was saying about just the public response to the refuge being used for this firing range complex. There were a series of protests that when I was part of Perez Texan in 2021, we held in response to the military deciding that there was no public hearing needed for the refuge or for Ritidian to be used. So I'm not sure what the possibility is for our leaders to speak to the Department of Defense about how there needs to be a public hearing first on, like Nick said, the comment period is not sufficient. It's you know, inaccessible, it's online. Some people don't have access to the internet, especially our Manamku. And so I think there definitely needs to be a public hearing before they even move forward with discussing these plans to you know, completely irreversibly harm the land there up at Ritidian. And just also wanting to go back to the inception of this project, the supplemental environmental impact statement hearings in 2014, where hundreds of people came out to 3 different hearings and said that they did not want the land to be used for this firing range complex. And it felt at that moment that all of the hundreds of people that have come forward, I mean, it was a beautiful sort of community effort to oppose this complex, only for plans to move forward, at the end. And so I do hope that you all, as our leaders, can have that discussion with the DoD about how every step of this process needs to go through at least a community town hall meeting. Situsmasi.
Situsmasi, Maria. Senator Brown, my apologies, I didn't recognize when you walked in, but you're recognized if you have any questions to the panel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't have any questions. I think they've all articulated where they're coming from with this issue of the land takings. You know, it's strange because we've grown up at a time in Guam where, on our Chamorro side, we've had this injustice to our people. And yet at the other end, we're also a very patriotic people. I'm also from a military family. I mean, yesterday I watched parts of the hearing, on how we're going to support our veterans here on Guam, because I don't know a member here that doesn't have a family member that has served or is serving in the U.S. military. And yet we're in a situation also, of wanting to protect our interest of our island and our safety of our people. And yet we have this history of land taking. And, I've often thought, if someone came and took my home and just took it away from me, what would I do? Where would I go? Where would my children go or grandchildren? And it's something that many families here have experienced. Some have had their lands returned, but there's still many here that have not. And this continued expansion certainly, that we're seeing with the construction of the new camp. And I've never been in opposition to the presence of our military to protect our interests in the Pacific. We've seen what happened when our people haven't been protected in World War II. I certainly don't want to see that happen again. But we still have the challenge of how do we address the lands that have been taken or to continue to want to expand into lands that we would like to see returned. And, I've been down to this facility at Ritidian, and the thought that it has to be rebuilt and removed somewhere else and built again, I'm sure the first time was already challenging enough. And it's really heartbreaking because, it's how do we undo the justice and the damage that has been done? And the generation of which this land was taken from that did not live to see it returned. Our grandparents, my grandmother, who I never met, she passed away just a few years after the war. And my grandfather's been many years also, he lived a little longer, but he's passed. The generation that was most impacted by this, they're not here to see this. They're not here to see resolution of their lands that have been taken from them, or to see that it doesn't get passed on to their children or their grandchildren or our great-great-great-grandchildren. So I appreciate all of you coming in and providing, every initiative that our people have taken has had to be ours, when you think about it. Even our good, we look at the federal government and yet we think, they're here, we're U.S. citizens, we have our U.S. passports. The majority of our people, a lot of my Chamorro cousins who are born in the mainland have never been to Guam. But they got more Chamorro blood than me. And yet here our people are. Our people are still challenged, but every initiative, as I was mentioning, we've had to take to speak and have our voices, to have even the degree of self-government that we do, even though we're not fully represented in our parent government of the United States. We've had to be the ones to do it. We've had to be the ones to speak up and speak out. And as much as it takes, as long as it takes, even if it's something that has to be passed on to our children or our grandchildren, if we don't do it, who will? Nobody else will do it. So we need to continue to do that. And I appreciate all of you coming and providing your voice and your heart and your soul in your presentations of what is important. I hope we continue. I hope our young people also continue to value, because without our land, without the healthiness of our land, what do we have? Where do we go? Where is our homeland? So thank you again, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to provide comment.
Yes, you're recognized, Maria, if you have additional testimony.
Situsmasi, I also wanted to acknowledge in my testimony, the 1995 legislation that I referenced, that was very clearly stated that Ritidian was taken by force, deceit, and theft, that your name was actually assigned one of the signatories on that piece of legislation. And so I just am so grateful for that, and I hope that you will continue to be a fighter for us, for the Ritidian families.
Thank you, and it's just a matter of the years. Look how many years have passed since that was passed by those previous legislatures. So it's a long road, but you know what? Like I said, we have to be the ones to do it, so we need to continue to advocate, and we continue to fight for what we believe is ours. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Masi, Senator Brown. So Speaker Chalahi is unable to be here today. She regrets not being here because she is ill, but she's in full support of the resolution, in support of Ritidian, all the landowners, and against any further destruction and loss of access to cultural sites and homelands. All right, so we have, I believe, one more, or two more? Two more, okay, so thank you for your patience. So I know Cassie had left. I apologize. Perhaps we can get testimony, written testimony. Sorry, what is your name? So I'm just going to go back to the beginning of the order of the sign-in sheet and just see who's up next. Okay, yeah, so we have Dominic Flores signed in advance. My apologies. Thank you for your patience, James. Okay, Dominic, you're recognized.
All right, buenas and hafide, senators. Also want to thank my family for being here, friends and family, aunties and cousins that are the original landowners of Ritidian. I also want to remember my descendant origin of the family Ritidian, my great-great-grandfather Benigno L.G. Flores and Dolores Martinez Flores. Also, my grandfather Juan Martinez Flores, who's always been here at these press conferences. And I mean, all the hearings for Ritidian, he always spoke about fighting for our family, our friends, our neighboring islands too. May he rest in peace. He was a really hard advocate for us. Also, my mom, Dominica Santos Flores, she also followed my grandfather here all the time. My uncle Chris Bajaro, he also was following us there too. And then also my uncle Kenny Santos Flores, they all fought and spoke at these hearings. I want to remember them and to thank them for bringing me here to speak for our family. I want to recall the time when I was in Ritidian, I was probably like maybe 9, 10 years old, and I would remember the smooth sand, the waves crashing along the shore with my cousins Chrissy, Maria, Rachel, even my Auntie Teresa and Auntie Lou behind me. We all would go to Ritidian like every single weekend. Right after school, we go down, have a good time. All my uncles would be fishing. We would all also be setting up the firewood to barbecue. And you know, we would just sit there and reminisce about the good times from generation to generation, and we talk about how beautiful the land is. And the fact that all of these things that are happening now, it's really devastating, and it really breaks my heart to see it. I haven't been to Ritidian in years, because it's really hard for me to go down because I remember so much of what has happened. I get emotional. Like even times I don't even want to look down there, but when I see these things happening now, it hurts. But to be honest, this is my first public hearing that I'm speaking for the first time. And I'm already 30 years old. And honestly, I want to say the time that we don't have time as much as before. Time is not on our judgment. So for that being said, I put my hands on my faith. I put the hands in our leaders like you guys to push through with this. And I hope and stay positive that we find justice, that we get our land back, original landowners, that we deserve it. I feel that Guam and us and our people, that our hospitality is just up there. We are like 100% through our hospitality. And I think when the the military comes into our island and the fish and wildlife come into here, they take advantage of it. And I feel sometimes it's okay to say enough is enough, no means no. Because they may be having a great time, but they're forgetting about, what about us? What about the original landowners? What about the local people? They need to ask us, or even talk about us, or even think about us. What about these guys? They need to show some respect for us, because what they're doing now is really disrespectful. So with that being said, I just want to thank you guys for presenting this to us. I want to thank my family that's speaking here. All the speakers here that are present today, I thank you guys for giving me the strength to speak for the first time in a long time. And I send a message to everyone that's watching home that do not be discouraged. You all have a voice. You all have something to say, and fight for what is yours and fight for what is truly yours. And don't let anyone take that away from you. Stay strong, have faith, and keep fighting, because we are the original landowners of this Familing Letexang. Biba Familing Letexang. Thank you.
Biba, Sidzus Masi, Dominic, and I just want to talk about the stories that you remember. You're growing up, and that's part of the richness. It's not just the land itself, but the stories and connection that we have to that land. And truly, that there's such an abundance. That's where our wealth lies, right? In our land, in our families, in our stories. So Sidzus Masi for being here. Next, I'm sorry, we're going to go by the listing, if that's okay. Next, we have James. James, thank you for your patience.
Sorry, it's cold in here, so having a hard time speaking. But, it amazes me that we're here after all of these years. The family's still fighting for what was originally theirs. For how many decades have they been fighting? How many generations have passed? And within one, piece of paper being signed, the military all of a sudden has this big giant project that didn't exist when all of this started. So I would just like to know what is their process so we can pass it on to the families. I too grew up going up over there. I'm not related. I'm pretty sure not to them at all. But I grew up walking over there. I don't know if you guys been up there and seen the laddie sites. There's a whole village up there. And I've also walked into the caves where fresh water is at. And we would go there after the typhoons to make sure that we got clean water, fresh water. We would go, or my elders would take us through these places and make us walk barefoot so we knew what we were feeling there, so we can not forget where we came from. The whole talk about the military protecting us makes me laugh, right? Because Guam and Japan has over 3,000 years of written history as friends. And it was the meddling of the U.S. that caused that whole thing for us to fight each other, right? I guess, getting overwhelmed with all these thoughts right now, but there's a lot of injustice happening. And to look at all these empty seats, it's kind of sad, because I can see all of the signs up there, please re-elect, elect this, elect that, and they're not even here for the people. So thanks for everyone that's actually sitting here listening. My family has also been trying to fight for so long for down there in Sumai. We got property down there that was taken by Big Navy. We've been fighting for so long that a lot of them have passed, and we've kind of just given up. So for me to come up over here is to show support, because I understand what it's like to just have something taken from you that is a beautiful piece of land, but also is rich in your own history. And that's pretty much all we got. For them to just pick and choose wherever the wildlife refuge is going to be, I'm just wondering who's going to email all those animals and species to shift over to the other side so they can be protected as well, Who's going to do that for them? Because, I need a job for that. It's gonna be pretty interesting to see how that works. You know, I'm a U.S. veteran, and I was off island for a while. You know, I lived in Hawaii for a while, but every time I come home, it's like nothing ever changed. You know, except for who's in power, or how many of your relatives are not doing so well, or how many passed. I got to keep coming back for people that passed, you know, because of cancers. You know, they were working in the base, they got sick. They were fishing in a certain area where it's contaminated, they got sick. We got all these agencies on Guam and all these people getting paid from, I'm guessing, our tax dollars or whatnot. And nothing seems to be working. You know, nothing seems to be moving. Like, Chamorro Land Trust has a list since 1995 of people waiting to get into the land. They have a list of land that's available for the people, but nothing has happened. You know, if I didn't go to work for a week, I would have been fired. So here we are, we're sitting here talking, and I feel like I haven't been here a lot, but I've seen it happening over and over and over, and I always think it's just a dead end because I see a lot of people fighting for stuff. I see a lot of support for them. And at the same time, I see nothing happening. But I see new bills introduced. I see new stuff getting passed. We're just skipping right through to all of these things. And it was said a couple of times that, you know, the governor and the whole thing, it's all silent on our people issues. They want to call us derogatory terms like anti-American, but let's be real. We're just trying to do what's right, get what's ours, and you know, continue living. Life's already hard as it is. Thank you. They like to tell us that the military buildup is good for our economy. But I'm going to tell you what, when I was in the military, I wouldn't come outside here to get groceries because the commissary is so cheap. I wouldn't come out here to buy a TV because the exchange is very cheap. I definitely wouldn't come out here to buy gas because gas is very cheap on base. I'm not really too sure what part of that is going to build the economy, or if it's like the restaurants and whatnot. But we have all of these things trying to blind us from what's really happening. What's really happening is families are being displaced and nobody's really representing. Whatever work you guys do, it still has to go against other people. You still got to get support from the other sides, or, you know, the government office or the governor's office. What is it going to take really to, I don't see the military having these many meetings to have something moved. So what system are they using that we could use as indigenous people? You know, like I said, our land's been taken, and we got nice land down there, big Navy. Also a nice beach, just like Taragi up there, you know. We're never going to see that. I'm never going to see that. Because I don't got the time or the energy to fight for that right now, because there's a lot of other things I'm trying to do that will also benefit the island of Guam long after I'm gone. So if the very least I could do is come up and speak for families that are actually still in the fight, then that's the reason why I'm here. There's a lot of stuff going on. You know, we don't think about our ancestors as much as we should. Because if we did, we wouldn't be acting the way we are right now. There's so much divide and conquer happening. There's so many different sides and so many clique-based society happening here, crabs in a bucket lifestyle here on the island, but we're only one. And if we can't unite to save the people, I don't even know what's the purpose of having all these offices, you know? There's a lot to say, and I don't want to get off track, so I just want to thank you guys for giving me the time to speak, and you know, hopefully the future is a lot brighter than what the past has been. You know, you guys got to remember that we are descendants of the beginning of time. Our DNA exists today because our ancestors existed. So if you're not going to think about the last 3,000 years of our people, you're definitely not thinking about the next 3,000 years of your legacy. Your kids, all of that, right? We need to remember who we are so we can know where to go. Thank you.
Biba Situzmasi, James, for that testimony. I'm glad you spoke up. I'd like to recognize Angela Santos for your testimony.
Sainamase na unayo unay ni tempo gini Janestina la resolution. Go si Angela Santos. I was on earlier, but I gave my mom, she wanted to say a few things, and just her spirit being here was immense. I want to say lastima. Lastima. Lastima, we have our Chamorro people who are indigenous to this land, having all of this time to come in here and speak up about the injustices that continually happen. And it seems like it's a broken record, right? A broken record of coming in here, crying, sobbing, saying how much exactly has been lost, how much we need to just buckle down and not let the military or the government take any more of our lands, and really have a secure future for our people on our lands. And Yancy Bobby mentioned a few things earlier about the feeling that the governor sharing with the opening of the exhibit at the museum and fishing. Fishing is a cultural practice that we live to, we perpetuate to live by. And with her sentiments, because of the museum opening and the exhibit happening there, her sentiments should shout, return the land, bring justice back to the people. That's what her sentiment should shout, because her sentiment says, oh wow, look at our rich culture and our rich history. Look at our heritage. It's very deep, man. We're so indigenous, but then our actions speak otherwise. And what Senator Barnett mentioned earlier is that there's a divide. The body here, the legislature, speaks for the people. But then really with the congressperson, the congressional delegate, the governor and the lieutenant governor, when there's no unification, really there's disarray. And we people look to the leaders for that support. The sentiments around the island is strong in this sense of indigenous identity and ownership of our land, to be able to deal with all of the atrocities that are happening around us and our lives on a daily, right? It's like, hey, if you're not going to support us, well, okay, well, great. I'm just going to lay back my head on my pillow and never mind the world. I'm going to give up because our leaders don't care. I'm going to keep coming back here saying the same thing. Same thing. And so I'd like to say, Fagmata, put fabot, put itaw-taw ginigi islota, itanota, sahami itaw-taw-tano. And this has been happening for decades, where I remember going to Potts Junction when that gate was closed, and the military had to hold up a strong front for the people who owned the land to enter. Then after that, the land was promised back to the original landowners, dan humalum I wildlife refuge, I federalis, dan masangani hit, bena tutuo nestin I wildlife refuge sa, man, necesita taputehin ni todo ni goga siya, iga siya. Lo hunggan, taputehi, debi nai, lo nai tati itanota, zasinya tana lotla taigwini. When we get back on our land, we will live, and everything will be harmonious. Restore the justice from this injustice for our people. I'd like to thank everybody who came out. I really wish that we had a lot more people. Where's that camera at? Manogagi camera. Chalo. I don't know why everybody isn't here with us. We all know that this is happening. Please stop turning a blind eye. If we keep saying we can't do anything about it, nothing's going to happen. If we don't stand up together, it's going to keep happening. Hitapago sa ifamaguon lamon. Por favor. Hitapago sa ifamaguon lamon. That's very heartbreaking to say when we're flowing in this direction. And por favor, if you guys can please share, yell towards Aralup. Patay itanota. Naitati familia ni itano niya. No? If we can have one front, but trust me, we'll have a whole back and around everybody of you guys. We will be there. Let's just go forward and attack this how we want to, because it's necessary. Sana maasi na unay zuesti na tempo na beoluk turisti, tabi togi zani tautauta. Sana maasi.
Sana mayasi, Anja. Maria.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment really quick on something Ange had shared about the attendance today. There were a lot of people that actually reached out that said that they wish that it was after their work hours. We have to acknowledge that we live in a colony and a lot of people are struggling and they need to be able to work to put food on their table. And so if you look at the history of public hearings around the firing range, usually it's a packed room, and so I'm not sure what there are obviously constraints on the legislative side, and that's totally fine, but I just wanted to acknowledge that there are a lot of people that wanted to be here today that couldn't, and then I also wanted to share that so many of my family wanted to attend today as well, but one of our matriarchs just passed away last week, and my Auntie Lou Punzalan Flores, and so there are many members of my family who aren't able to attend. And then one last thing, I didn't intend to just be commenting, but my son wants to say something, and I usually don't pressure my kids to share, if it's out of their comfort zone, but he's saying he wants to say something. But I wanted to also, the last thing is just commentary on the governor, that there were about 25 different groups who had met with her. Here you go. Sorry, my daughters. We've been here 3 hours, and the kids have been good so far. But now the meltdowns are happening. But so the governor at that meeting, all of us kind of shared our different perspectives. There were so many different groups representing various issues around the firing range complex. And her response was that we're a colony. It's our political status that's keeping us from being able to do anything. And that was her reasoning as to why her hands were tied. And to that, I think it's important that we all come to this realization that although our political status ties our hands in many ways, that shouldn't stop us from speaking out and being loud and, being public about it, being public about the ways that she doesn't agree with the way that plans are moving forward for this firing range complex. So we're going to continue to be loud. We're not going anywhere. And I hope that if the governor is watching this, that she knows and understands the importance of agreeing with this legislation and passing it when it does go through the legislature. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to my son Camden, if that's okay.
Yeah, we definitely welcome all members to speak, to provide testimony. So you're recognized, Camden. If you can say your name for the record, your full name. Oh, I think you're already on the list. So yeah, you're recognized.
My name's Camden. I'm from Chamorro. My great-great-grandpa makes the get back Ritidian. Biba.
Anything else? Anything? Yeah. What do you like about Ritidian?
Well, I like the beautiful ocean.
Go ahead.
The beautiful ocean.
You like the beautiful?
The baby turtles. And all about the cute little fishies. Zeus Rossi.
This is Masi Camden for your testimony. So I think at this time I'm going to open the floor to my colleagues if they have comments, questions at this point. Senator Tadegui, Senator Brown. Okay, so this concludes the hearing for this resolution. So we will continue to accept testimony, but I would like to provide a closing statement before we close. So Zeus Masi Todos Hamzu for your testimony and your heartfelt, words and contributions to this resolution. As a sacred site, La Texan gifts our island with the cultural knowledge of our ancestors and a critical habitat for our native flora and fauna. Resolution 325 is a concerted effort to protect the affected portions of La Texan facing immediate disturbance from the planned relocation of the Ritidian Wildlife Refuge Center, as found in the 2020 Memorandum of Agreement and the live fire training range construction. The full protection of La Texan is an indigenous environmental rights issue of which are interwoven. The relationship between indigenous rights, including self-determination and environmental justice, is affirmed and protected under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Although the U.S. federal government has expressed its support of this declaration, they have failed to recognize the Chamorro people's rights to free, prior, and informed consent and self-determination in their continued militarization of La Texan and all of Guahan. It is every intent of this resolution to support the full recognition of our Chamorro people's indigenous rights to their lands and waters and our overall island's movement towards self-determination. As our community continues our centuries-long quest for the fulfillment of our rights, for the protection of our home, we must exercise every effort possible to halt the further destruction of our island. Resolution 325 is one such effort to immediately protect La Texan as we continue to advocate for the full recognition of our right to self-determination. We appreciate the wisdom, strength, and advocacy of the original landowners fighting for the protection of La Texan, for our people's joint efforts to preserve La Texan and all of Guahan, and for all in the movement of our island's restorative justice. Dankalu Saduas Masi. So the committee will continue to receive testimony until April 16th. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning, which can be dropped off here at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. The time is now 4:49. The committee will now adjourn. Saduas Masi.